Rain hammered the Motel 6 sign until the neon stuttered. Blue. Dark. Blue again. Over a half-empty parking lot. Inside room 12. Aisha leaned her forehead against the cold window and watched the glass bloom white with her breath. She wiped it clear with her sleeve. That was when the headlights turned into the lot, cutting through the rain in a way that made her whole body go rigid. Two beams slid under the flickering neon, attached to a silver pickup she knew too well. The dent in the chrome bumper from the mailbox he'd knocked over. The sag on the driver's side because he'd said mechanics were thieves, and he could live with a little lean. Her stepdad eased the truck into the space directly beneath her window like he owned it. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She stumbled back from the glass. Her hip banged the nightstand. The lamp wobbled, shade-tipping. She caught it before it toppled, the bulb throwing hard light over thin carpet. Damp jeans. A backpack. Half unzipped. She had been careful. Cash bus ticket. Old phone smashed and dropped in a gas station trash can. Burner bought 3 towns away. No names. No posts, not even a goodbye text to the one friend who had still tried to check on her after the funeral, and still he was here. The engine cut off. For a beat, the only sound was rain hitting metal, and her own pulse rushing in her ears. His door opened. Heavy boots hit the pavement. Even without seeing his face, she felt him, the weight of his steps, the certainty in them, the way he moved like the world was something that owed him. 17. Alone. And 100 yards from a clerk who hadn't looked up when she checked in. This wasn't the kind of motel people got rescued from. It was the kind they disappeared from. On the bed, the cheap phone lay on top of the faded blanket. Its black screen suddenly louder than the television she hadn't turned on. Her fingers shook when she picked it up. 3 contacts stared back. Kesha, from her old school, from before chemo appointments and casseroles left on the porch, and the way people stopped calling because grief was awkward. A crisis hotline whose number she'd memorized but never dialed. And a group chat, Iron Riders Community. The name pulled a different day to the surface, like film catching in a projector. Summer sun. Main Street blocked off for a charity ride. Chrome lined in neat rows. Engines rumbling like polite thunder. Her mother's scarf tied around her wrist so she wouldn't lose it in the crowd. A volunteer badge crooked on her shirt as she handed out water and tried not to cry. A woman with silver hair in a braid and a leather vest had noticed, "You look like you're carrying the world, sweetheart," she'd said, voice low and kind. "You got people." Aisha had shrugged, because admitting she didn't felt like too much. "Now you do." The woman had tapped her phone, then Aisha's, a volunteer badge crooked on her shirt as she handed out water and tried not to cry. "Anything at all. You text this group. We show up. Sister Ruth." Iron Riders stitched across her back. After her mom died, Aisha muted the chat. Ronald didn't like unknown numbers or notifications he hadn't approved. He'd started taking her phone at night, scrolling through her messages after her mom died. Now the group name sat on her burner screen like a dare. Outside, the truck door slammed. Boots started down the concrete walkway toward her room. Outside, Stepdad found me, making jokes that weren't jokes about fast little girls and their secrets. Motel 6. Please. She hit send. The message jumped to the top of the chat, a single gray bubble above months of photos. Group rides, charity flyers, plates of barbecue at long tables. A voice in her head called her stupid. They were strangers on motorcycles. They didn't owe her a thing, but strangers hadn't broken her. Family had. She set the phone on the bed and backed into the corner where the 2 walls met, pressing her spine against peeling wallpaper, trying to make herself so small the room could swallow her. The doorknob rattled once, then 3 hard knocks shook the thin wood. Aisha. His voice came through the door, muffled but razor-edged. Open up. We're going home. Home. The words scraped across 2 different sets of memories, her mother humming in a warm kitchen, garlic and onions in a pan, late-night movies, soft blankets, then rules taped to the fridge after the funeral, no locks, no closed doors, no calls without permission, no friends he hadn't approved, no arguments. Come on now, he said. Don't make this difficult. The knob rattled again, harder. The whole door vibrated in its loose frame. She'd locked the regular latch, but not the deadbolt. The metal plate around it was cracked from years of slamming. It wouldn't hold if he lost his patience. I've been driving 6 hours, he said, voice shifting into that reasonable tone she trusted least. You're tired. I'm tired. You got nowhere to go. No money. No friends. Your aunt won't take you. I made sure of that. So, you open this door, or I get the clerk to open it. Your choice. Fear pinned her to the corner, $43 in her wallet. An aunt who had believed him before. A clerk who'd slid her the key without once meeting her eyes. For a second, returning felt easier than fighting. Just unlock the door, climb into the truck. An aunt who had believed him before. Returning felt easier than fighting. Underneath it, a new sound rose, low, distant, growing. At first, she thought it was more thunder. Then she realized it was too steady, too layered. Engines. The vibration reached the soles of her feet through the thin carpet. Outside. He muttered something she couldn't catch. She crept back to the window and peeled the curtain away an inch. Headlights poured off the highway into the lot in a smooth, unbroken line. Motorcycles, dozens of them, swept into the parking lot. White and yellow beams cut across the asphalt. Exhaust rolled in a low, constant growl that made the glass tremble in its frame. They didn't park at random. They moved like they'd practiced this. Bikes, fanning into a semicircle around the silver pickup under the neon sign. 10 bikes, 20, 30. She lost count. Rain streamed off helmets and leather vests. 20. Iron riders. Rain streamed off helmets and leather vests. Rippling pool of light. Off patches that read, her stepdad, stood between the truck and her door. Keycard frozen in his hand. Eyes flicking from one bike to the next. The lead motorcycle rolled to a stop a few feet from him. The rider killed the engine and swung off in one smooth motion. He was tall, with gray in his beard, and the posture of someone who'd already lived through worse than a rainy parking lot. His vest was worn at the edges. On the back, a large patch read Iron Riders, and the rocker underneath said President. He walked forward through the rain, as if he had all the time in the world. You lost. Friend, he asked. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. As if on cue, the other engines went quiet, shutting down one by one until the lot was mostly rain, and the ticking of cooling metal. Aisha counted rows without meaning to. 99 bikes, 99 riders, all facing one man. Her phone buzzed in her hand. At the top of the screen, a new message glowed. Eagle, sit tight. Eagle, we got you. You're one of ours now. Outside, Ronald tried on his practice smile, the one he used to charm teachers and cops. This is a private family matter. Gentlemen, he said, forcing out a chuckle. My daughter. Stepdaughter. The gray-bearded man. Eagle. Corrected. Voice flat. And she's not going anywhere with you. Boots shifted on wet concrete. Leather creaked. Listen here, Ronald said. That girl is troubled. She runs off. Makes up stories. Like the bruises on her arms. A woman's voice cut through. A biker with silver hair in a braid stepped out from the line. Aisha recognized her instantly. Sister Ruth. Like the way she flinches when men raise their voices, Ruth added. Those kinds of stories, Ronald's jaw flexed. I don't have to explain myself to a bunch of concerned citizens. Eagle said, those kinds of stories, we responded. I don't have to explain myself to a bunch of red and blue light spilled across the motel walls. As a sheriff's cruiser rolled into the lot, we got a message from a miner saying she was in danger. Sheriff Lisa Carter stepped out. Tires whispered on wet pavement as it stopped near the bikes. Her gaze swept over the semicircle of motorcycles, the furious man, the closed door of room 12. Somebody want to tell me what I'm walking into? Hand resting near her weapon but not on it. Eagle didn't look away from Ronald. Wellness check. Sheriff, she asked. He said, we're making sure nobody drags her out before you hear her story. Ronald moved fast. Sheriff Carter, thank God, he said. These people are harassing me. I'm just trying to collect my daughter. She ran away from home. I have every legal right. Stepdaughter, Ruth said again. And if she's in danger, you don't have any rights at all. Eagle added. Carter's gaze shifted to the door. Room 12, she called, voice level. You okay in there? Inside. Aisha's hand found the knob. Her phone buzzed once more. Eagle, when she asks, tell her the truth. All of it. We're not leaving until you're safe. Her fingers trembled as she slid the deadbolt back. The metal thunk sounded louder than the rain. She opened the door a crack. Rain, leather, badges, and 100 eyes turned toward her. Under any other circumstances, it would have felt like a nightmare. Tonight, it felt like a wall. I'm okay, she said. Her voice shook but held, but I don't want to go with him. Aisha, Ronald snapped, get out here right now. You're embarrassing me. Sheriff Carter stepped closer, placing herself fully between him and the opening. Why'd you run? Miss, she asked, eyes never leaving Aisha's face. He says you're troubled. That true? This was the line. Once she crossed it, there was no going back to pretending. He hits me, Aisha said. The words scraped her throat on the way out. He touches me wrong. After my mom died, he changed. I tried to tell my aunt. He got to her first, said I was lying for attention. I had to run. The parking lot went still. Even the rain seemed to soften for a heartbeat. That's a goddamn lie. Ronald exploded. Sheriff, she's been watching too many movies. I never laid a hand on her, except to discipline when she existed, Eagle asked softly. Carter had seen real fear before. She saw it now in the way Aisha gripped the door frame, in the way her shoulders stayed braced, even with a sheriff between them. I'm an officer of the law, Ronald started. And I'm the one with the badge, Carter said, her tone sharpening. What I'm seeing is a situation that needs investigating. She looked back at Aisha. Will you come give a formal statement? She asked. We'll get you somewhere safe tonight. Yes, Aisha said. The word came out on a breath that felt like it had been stuck in her chest for months. Please. Ronald lunged toward the door. He didn't get far. Eagle stepped into his path without touching him. 24 bikers moved with him, forming a human wall of leather and denim between Ronald and the girl. You don't want to do that, Eagle said quietly. Trust me. For the first time, Ronald seemed to really see the math. 99 bikers, 1 sheriff, 1 girl who had finally stopped being quiet. This isn't over. He spat. He got lawyers. That girl owes me nothing, Sister Ruth said. She doesn't owe you anything. Carter's handcuffs clicked around his wrists. She guided him toward the cruiser as he cursed and twisted against the metal. Behind her, Eagle turned back to the doorway. Come on, kid, he said, voice softening. Let's get you dry. Aisha stepped fully out of room 12 and into the rain. The door shut behind her with a hollow motel click. 99 engines roared to life together, the sound rolling across the lot and up into the dark. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a promise. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Not bleach, not cigarette smoke, not cheap floral cleaner trying to hide something sour. Motor oil, coffee, something baking. Aisha blinked up at a ceiling that wasn't stained or buzzing. Pale morning light slipped through a high, narrow window, cutting a rectangle of gold across a row of metal shelves stacked with boxes and old helmets. For half a second, panic flared. No idea where she was. No sense of how she'd gotten here. Then she heard it. The soft tick of cooling engines. It all came back in a rush. She pushed herself up on her elbows. The cot creaked under her weight. The room was small, probably a storage space once. Someone had cleared a corner for the bed, laid out a folded blanket that didn't smell like smoke, and left a neat stack of clothes on a metal chair. Jeans, a faded t-shirt, a gray hoodie that carried the clean, anonymous scent of laundry detergent, her own clothes, and left a neat stack of clothes on a metal chair. Jeans stiff with dried rain and fear lay in a pile near the door. She swung her legs over the side of the cot. The concrete floor was cold against her bare feet. For a second, she sat there, palms pressed into the thin mattress, steadying herself against a faint tilt that was more memory than motion. Her body braced for yelling. Nothing came, just a muffled clatter of tools, a radio playing something old and soft in the distance. A low murmur of voices. She dressed quickly, fingers clumsy on the zipper. The concrete floor was cold against her bare feet. A low murmur of voices, fingers clumsy on the zipper. She rolled her shoulders once. The world opened into an enormous garage. It was bigger than any room she'd ever been in. Half of it was full of motorcycles, rows and rows of them in different stages of repair. When she cracked the door and stepped out, polished, within an inch of their lives, some gleamed. Tool benches lined one concrete wall, every pegboard hook occupied by something sharp or useful. Posters covered the cinder block. Bands. Some gleamed. A faded calendar with a dog in sunglasses. In one corner, old road maps. She recognized a few bikes from last night, though seeing them at rest in the daylight made them feel less like war horses and more like sleeping animals. Morning. Kid. Eagle's voice came from her left. A cluster of mismatched couches made a kind of living room around a scarred coffee table and a TV older than she was, wiping his hands on a rag. Without rain and flashing lights, he just looked like a tired man in his late 50s. Deep lines at the corners of his eyes, gray threaded thick through his beard. His vest hung open over a flannel shirt. The iron rider's patch on his back was cracked at the edges from wear. "Sleep okay?" he asked. She nodded. Yeah, good." He jerked his chin toward the far side of the garage. "Kitchen's that way. Sister Ruth'll skin me alive if I let you walk past her coffee without eating something." He was standing near one of the workbenches. Someone had ripped out the carpet and dropped in a fridge, a stove, a sink, and a long counter crowded with mugs. The smell of coffee was stronger here, threaded with sugar and butter. Sister Ruth stood at the stove, stirring something in a pan. Her silver braid hung down the middle of her back. The leather vest was gone, replaced by a faded t-shirt and an apron with a cartoon skull wearing a chef's hat. "Look who finally woke up," she said without turning, like she'd felt Aisha before seeing her. "You're just in time. Eggs are almost ready." Aisha started. "I can help. You can sit," Ruth said. "Help by not passing out from hunger on my floor." A plate appeared in front of Aisha at the little table. Scrambled eggs, toast, sliced fruit, arranged like someone had thought about it. A mug followed, steam curling up. "Hot chocolate," Ruth said. "You look like you need something soft." Aisha picked up the mug with both hands. The first sip was so sweet and warm, It hurt her throat. She hadn't realized how long she'd been living on vending machines and gas station snacks. Across the garage, a thin guy in his 30s sat on a rolling stool with a laptop balanced on his knees. Thick glasses, dark hair in need of a cut, sleeves shoved up to reveal ink running down his forearms. He looked more like a burnt-out coder than a biker. He caught her watching and lifted his chin in a quick nod. "Shadow," Ruth said, following her gaze. "Our resident gremlin. Don't let the computer fool you. He can ride a straight line. Barely. Don't let the computer fool you. Better than you park." Shadow shot back without looking up. The exchange drew a small, startled smile out of Aisha before she could stop it. Ruth sat down beside her with her own mug. "So," she said, "how's your body?" Aisha blinked. "My what?" "Bruises. Headaches. Anything feel worse than it did last night?" She did a quick internal inventory. The ache in her hip from the nightstand, the old bruises on her arms and ribs, the knot in her stomach that never seemed to go. "I'm okay," she said. "Just tired." "That's allowed." Ruth tore off a piece of toast and popped it in her mouth, chewing for a moment. "Today's going to be a lot. Better to face it with food in you. A lot. We gotta hear your story," Eagle said, wandering over with a coffee of his own. He sat on the edge of a workbench, close enough to be present but far enough not to crowd her. "Then we figure out our next move." Her fork hovered above the eggs. She'd told pieces of it before, to a school counselor who'd called Ronald in to sit beside her while she opened up, to her aunt who had sighed and said grief made teenagers dramatic, to herself. At night, in the dark, it had never changed anything. Eagle must have seen something in her face. "You're not on trial here," he said. "We believe you. The details just help us know what we're dealing with." It was the way he said it. Flat. No coaxing, no sugar. "We believe you." The words loosened something in her chest. They came out in fits and starts at first. The hospital hallways, the hospice bed. The words loosened something in her chest. Her mother's hand going limp in hers. Ronald picking up the pieces in ways that felt like help until they didn't. Then schedules. Then rides. Then her phone. Her passwords. Her wardrobe. Her friendships. Her passwords. How often he reminded her she owed him. How he'd removed the lock from her bedroom door without asking. Ruth's hand settled on the table, palm up, close enough that Aisha could see it but not touching unless she reached. She didn't, but the option sat there like a safety rail. "And 3 months ago," Eagle asked quietly. "Things changed." She nodded, staring at a point on the table. "He started coming into my room at night," she said. "At first he just stood there, in the doorway, then inside, watching me. At first he just stood there," she said. "At first he just stood there, but I could feel him there. At first he just stood there. One night he sat on the bed, said I looked just like my mom at my age, touched my hair, the eggs on her plate blurred," she said. "He got mad, said I didn't trust him, said I was being fresh. He slammed the door so hard the frame cracked." The garage had gone very still. Tank, the big man she remembered from the parking lot, leaned against a lift nearby, arms folded, jaw tight. Blaze was polishing a gas tank. She'd already polished 3 times. "That's when you ran," Ruth said softly. Aisha nodded. "I thought if I got far enough, if he couldn't find me, it would stop." On the other side of the garage, Shadow closed his laptop halfway, letting it rest on his thighs. "You were smart," he said. "For what it's worth," she snorted weakly. "Didn't feel smart when he pulled into the lot, before I'd finished freaking out." Shadow's mouth twisted. "Yeah," he said. "About that, yeah." Laptop under one arm. Up close, she could see faint, dark circles under his eyes. like he spent more time with screens than sleep. You bought that phone with cash, right? He asked. No ID, no rewards card, no nothing. She nodded. Gas station 3 towns over. I didn't even say my name. Okay, so you didn't screw up there. He opened the laptop and turned the screen, so Ruth and Eagle could see rows of code and tiny windows. Phone itself did. What do you mean? She asked. I mean whoever sold him the original plan, or someone he paid, flagged your number on the network level. Shadow tapped a line of text. There's tracking software baked into the SIM. Not an app, not something you can see. It phones home the second it hits a tower. Her skin went cold in a different way. So he knew. As soon as I turned it on, one ping wouldn't be precise, Shadow said, but a few hours of movement, he could triangulate pretty close. Narrow it down to the cluster of towers around this motel. Then all he has to do is drive and look for a bus station, cheap rooms, places someone your age might hide. She gripped the edge of the table. I thought it was my fault, she said, quietly furious at herself. Like I'd messed up. I kept replaying everything I did. That's what they count on, Ruth said, to make you think every road leads back to you. Shadow's fingers flew over the keyboard. This kind of tracking isn't standard, he said. It's not something some random dealer in a strip mall installed. This is government-adjacent code, military grade. Eagle's attention sharpened. Meaning, he asked, meaning your stepdad isn't just a guy with anger issues and a salvage yard. Shadow said, he's got access to tech civilians, don't get, which makes me wonder what else his business looks like. He pulled up a new window. A logo appeared at the top. Hayes Auto Salvage, LLC. Public records are a beautiful thing, Shadow said. Tax filings, Hayes Auto Salvage, property deeds, business licenses, columns of numbers and lines of text scrolled past. Aisha watched Eagle's eyes skim faster than she could track. Most people don't bother to read the fine print, Eagle said. In a town with, 3 million gross last year. That's just what he reported, Shadow said. 20,000 people. Columns of numbers and lines of text scrolled past. He clicked. For a salvage yard. Lists of VIN, and a new spreadsheet came up. Locations. These vehicles came through his yard. Either he's the best salesman in the state, or he's moving more than scrap metal, according to his own inventory system. But when you cross-reference the VINs, he tapped a key. He said, a whole lot of them are listed as stolen in other states. He finished. Tank let out a low whistle. Chop shop, he said. Chop shop, plus title fraud, Shadow said. He's revining, shipping, laundering, and he's sloppy, probably because he's been paying off the right people. Another click, another sheet, this one shorter and uglier. Names, departments, amounts. Sheriff's Deputy Jenkins, Shadow said, pointing. $2,000 a month. DMV clerk, 1,500. Pointing. State inspector. Flat rate per rebuilt vehicle passed without inspection. So even if I told, she said, he still would have had people. Aisha's stomach twisted. Eagle exhaled slowly. What about hard copies? He asked. Guys like him always keep some things off the computer. Aisha stared at the glowing list of names and numbers. Then another memory surfaced. Late night. The salvage office, Ronald thinking she was asleep on the couch, muttering to himself as he spun a dial. There's a safe, she said, at the yard, in one of the warehouses, behind a calendar. He keeps files in there, thick ones, not just car stuff. Shadow perked up. Did you ever see him open it? He asked. She nodded slowly. Behind a calendar, not just car stuff. He thought I was out cold. He did the numbers out loud, like he was reminding himself. I watched through my eyelashes. She could hear his voice again, soft and almost fond. 2, 8, 4, 5, 1, 9, she said. Ruth went still. What's that? Eagle asked. My mom's birthday. Aisha said. Month, day, year. Silence settled over the table. Not empty, charged. He'd turned her mother's life into a lock on his secrets. Ruth's hand finally closed over Aisha's knuckles, warm and steady. He doesn't get to keep using her like that, Ruth said. Not if we can help it. Shadow sat back on his stool, mind already racing ahead. Eagle looked from him to Aisha, some quiet decision firming in his face. This stopped being just about one girl the second he bought a car. Eagle said, and the second we saw those stolen VINs. He set his coffee down. We're not just going to hide you, kid, he said. We're going to take his whole operation apart. Aisha stared at him. You can't go after him, she said. He'll come for you, for all of you. Eagle's mouth twitched. He already started that war when he went after you, he said. Difference is, we fight back with something he doesn't understand. What? She asked. Evidence, Shadow said, lifting the laptop, and a very, very bright light. Outside, an engine turned over, somewhere nearby. A dog barked. Life continued. Indifferent. In the middle of a concrete garage that smelled like oil and coffee, a girl who'd thought she was running alone realized she'd stumbled into something else entirely. A family. In the middle of a concrete garage that smelled like oil and coffee, Ronald's fury sat in the room like a second person. He paced Harold Vance's office, boots grinding into a rug that probably cost more than Aisha's entire wardrobe. The blinds were half closed against the gray afternoon. A girl who'd thought she was running alone realized she'd stumbled into something else entirely. 99 bikers. He spat. He paced Harold Vance's office. And you're telling me there's nothing we can do? Harold Vance, attorney at law, adjusted his glasses with a measured hand. Everything about him was measured, from the neat part in his hair to the way he stacked words like building blocks. Legally, Vance said, they responded to what they claim was a distress call from a minor. She voluntarily left with them and was delivered to a licensed safe house that your sheriff verified. He laced his fingers. They walked the line very carefully. Ronald, I don't care about legally. Ronald snapped. He slammed his fist on the polished desk. The pen holder jumped. That girl knows too much. She's been in my house, in my office. You know what's at stake? What's at stake is optics, Vance said calmly. You are, on paper, a grieving stepfather with a troubled teen who ran away. They are a motorcycle club with a criminal stereotype attached. Who do you think the public is primed to believe? Ronald stopped pacing. What are you saying? He asked. Ronald stopped pacing. From the neat part in his hair to the way he stacked words like building blocks. Before they can, 2 hours from now. Every screen in this county can be telling your version of events. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, a plan turned into words. When the story reached Aisha, it arrived through a cracked television in the corner of the Iron Rider's garage. The volume had been low at first, a background buzz behind the clank of tools and murmur of voices. Then someone recognized the face on the screen. Turn that up. The click of the remote cut through the room. The anchor's voice sharpened. Local businessman and community figure Ronald Hayes is asking for the public's help tonight, claiming his teenage stepdaughter has been taken by a motorcycle gang. Aisha's fork froze halfway to her mouth. The screen showed a photo of her from her mother's funeral. Eyes red, cheeks blotchy, hair pulled back in a rushed bun. It had been taken when she'd stepped outside for air, away from casseroles and pity. Now her face sat next to bold text, missing teen, troubled past. Her stomach flipped. He looks real broken up. Blaze muttered it, wiping her hands on a rag as she leaned against the workbench. Ronald appeared in a pre-taped interview, sitting in what looked like the good living room, the one with the nice curtains she'd never been allowed to touch. "My Aisha has been struggling since her mother passed," he said, voice heavy with practiced ache. She's had behavioral issues, running away, making things up for attention. I've done my best, but I'm just one man. And now these bikers, this gang, has taken her. The authorities won't help. I'm begging the community, please, help me bring her home. B-roll of motorcycles rolled over his word, flashing chrome, leather vest, tattoos, ripped from some generic stock. The station obligingly ran his Facebook post beside him, a block of text under a photo of Aisha. "My stepdaughter Aisha has a history of running away and making false accusations. She's a troubled teen who's been struggling since her mother's death. Now a dangerous biker gang called the Iron Riders has taken her." The camera cut back to the anchor, eyebrows knit in sympathetic concern. "Law enforcement confirms the girl is currently at a facility they describe as a licensed safe house," she said. The motorcycle club has declined to comment. Aisha realized she hadn't taken a breath. "Turn it off," she said. Her voice was thin. It didn't sound like hers. No one moved. The broadcast shifted to street interviews. A neighbor from their block, the one who'd borrowed sugar from her mom but never brought anything when she was in chemo, shook his head for the camera. "Ronald's a good man," he said. "He stepped up when her dad ran off. If he says she's troubled, she's troubled. Those biker types, you never know what they're into." The remote finally clicked. Silence flooded back in, a heavier sound than the TV had made. Aisha's hands shook in her lap. "This is my fault," she said. "You're on TV because of me." "No," Sister Ruth said sharply. "We're on TV because he is exactly who we thought he was. He's twisting everything." Aisha said, "People will believe him. He's twisting everything." Ruth's chair scraped as she moved closer. Up in the rafters, dust motes spun in a sunbeam like tiny différentes planètes. "This is what abusers do," Ruth said. "They rewrite the story before anyone else can tell it. They make you the problem. He's good at it," Aisha whispered. "He cried at the funeral and then yelled at me in the car after because I hugged too long." Nobody saw that part. Eagle had been watching in silence, arms folded, jaw tight. Now he pushed off the workbench. "Blaze, Tank," he said. "Check in with our contacts. Sponsors. The community center. They're gonna see this. I want to know who's spooked and who's still got a spine." Blaze nodded, already pulling her phone from her pocket. Shadow rolled over on his stool like he'd been waiting for his cue. "That's not the worst of it," he said. He set his laptop on the coffee table, turned the screen so the nearest cluster could see. Aisha forced herself to look. A web page loaded, cluttered layout, angry red headers, flashing ads for survival gear. At the top, exclusive, the dark truth about the Iron Riders gang. "Oh, come on," Blaze said. "Already." Shadow scrolled. The article was a fever dream of half-truths and outright lies. It described the club as a criminal organization masquerading as a charity, accused them of drug trafficking, gun running, and now harboring a runaway teen for unknown purposes. Photos lifted from public charity rides were cropped to make them look menacing. A shot of Eagle standing with a kid at a toy drive looked at the right angle, like a hostage situation. "Someone's been busy," Shadow said. "This went up 40 minutes ago. Already got 1,000 shares." The comment section made Aisha's skin crawl. "These biker gangs are all the same. Bet that girl's pregnant and lying about it. Child services needs to get involved." "They don't even know me," she said. Shadow said. Shadow said, people don't need facts. They need a feeling. Right now, Ronald and his lawyer are feeding them one. Eagle's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Eagle's phone buzzed. The community center wants us to take a step back from public events until the situation is clarified, he said. He glanced at the screen, sighed once through his nose. We're bad for their image now. Another buzz. Blaze checked hers. And our main sponsor wants to reassess the partnership, she said. Corporate speak for, we're out until we know which way the wind blows. In Fru, something inside Aisha sagged. They're going to ruin you, she said, because you helped me. Eagle looked at her then, really looked, like he was taking measure not just of what had happened to her but of what she was made of. Eagle looked at her then, he said, we've had our reputation dragged through worse mud than this. We cleaned it by what we did, not what people said. This is bigger, she said. He has money. Lawyers. Cops. She said. She said. Shadow said. She said. What? Actual proof, Shadow said. He can throw stories all day. Actual proof, Shadow said. But if we drop the right receipts in the right places, Eagle nodded once. He asked. He can throw stories all day. Eagle nodded once. Beyond what we're already facing, VIN logs, payment spreadsheets, tracking code, all of it, to the feds and a few media outlets at the same time. They'll have to look, he said, especially with an anonymous tip about trafficking added in. They'll have to look, he said. Shadow shrugged one shoulder. Then we tell them the truth, he said. That a girl came to us for help. We saw things that didn't add up, and we handed everything to the proper authorities, which is exactly what happened. Aisha stared at the frozen funeral photo of herself on the laptop screen, the one some blogger had dragged into their conspiracy web. The girl in the picture looked small, lost, like she wanted to sink into the background. She wasn't that girl anymore. If he wins this, she said slowly, what happens to the next kid who needs help? Ruth's hand landed on her shoulder. Firm. They don't get us, Ruth said. Not like this. Eagle's phone buzzed again. He let it buzz. He's smart, Shadow said. He's not hitting us where we're strong. He's hitting us where image matters. Sponsors, parents, people with half a picture and a whole lot of fear. Eagle reached down and closed the laptop halfway. The conspiracy headline folding into itself. Then we stopped playing defense. He said, we don't argue with his story. We show them what he's really been doing. Outside, rain started again, tapping on the high windows. Somewhere beyond the bay doors, trucks moved on the highway. Lives going on without knowing any of this was happening. Shadow flipped the laptop back open, his fingers already moving. If he wants a war of stories, he said, mouth set, we answer with receipts. The glow from Shadow's laptop turned the garage into a cave of blue light. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. Inside, the only sounds were the faint hum of the fridge and Shadow's fingers hitting the keys fast enough to sound like rain on metal. Aisha sat on the edge of the couch, hoodie sleeves twisted between her fingers. Her eyes ached from staring at screen, news anchors, wildfire comment sections, Ronald's weaponized grief. We answer with receipts, Shadow had said. Now, he was digging for them. Lines of code scrolled past in pale green. Windows opened and vanished. To Aisha, it looked like a magic trick, a tired, angry magic trick. Talk to me, Eagle said from behind him. He stood with his arms folded, weight shifted onto one hip, the way he did when he was forcing himself to be patient. I've mapped every public record we can get, Shadow said. Business filing, shipping manifests, tax returns, the way he did when he was forcing himself to be patient. But if we want the kind of case that survives his lawyer, he tapped another key. A new screen popped up, boxes, labeled with tiny camera icons. We go inside. Ruth frowned. She was perched on the arm of the couch, close enough to Aisha that their shoulders almost touched. Inside how? She asked. Shadow pointed at the screen. Security feeds, he said. Ronald's got cameras all over the salvage yard. I've seen glimpses from public records. He's proud of his state-of-the-art system. No, you can get into that from here, Tank asked. Shadow snorted softly. He bought the cheap, cloud-connected package and never changed the default password. He said, it's like leaving his office keys in the front door. Is it legal? Blaze asked. The question hung there. They all knew the answer. Shadow blew out a breath. Not really, he said. If he were just a jerk with a bad temper, I'd tell you to forget it. But after what we've seen, stolen cars, crooked cops, tracking tech that doesn't belong in civilian hands. He dragged his hand over his face. We're already in the blast radius, he said. This is the only way to get a full picture before he buries it. Eagle's gaze slid to Ruth. What's your read? He asked. Ruth looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She stared at the rows of camera icons for a long moment. In my social work days, she said slowly, we were always taught, do it clean or don't do it. Paper trails. And if the trail went cold because someone with money shut doors, that was that. She lifted her eyes to Aisha. That's how kids like her get left behind. She lifted her eyes to Aisha. And if the trail went cold because someone with money shut doors and still lost people. Silence drifted down from the rafters. And if the trail went cold because someone with money shut doors, Ruth added, it's not, but pretending the system will save her when we can see all the ways it already failed. She shook her head. That's not noble either. Silence drifted down from the rafters. Then, look away. It wasn't a vote. That's not noble either. She was the one whose life was already sitting on the scales. He never plays by the rules, she said quietly. Ever. If you do, she was the one whose life was already sitting on the scales. Eagle's jaw flexed. We do not become him. We do not become him. If you do, we don't plant evidence. We don't hurt people. We get the truth. That's it. And if we trip a wire, Tank asked, he cries hacker bikers and we're done. Then we make sure we're not the only ones who see what we find. Shadow said, once it's in the hands of people who can actually throw cuffs on him, we're just the messengers. He tapped a final key. The boxes on the screen flickered, then filled. Grainy, black and white feeds blinked to life one after another. Angles of chain-link fence, rows of cars stacked like crooked teeth. The corrugated metal walls of warehouses Aisha knew too well. She leaned forward without meaning to. There, she said, pointing. That's warehouse 3. Shadow clicked the image. It expanded. The view showed a roll-up door and a loading dock, the concrete stained with dark patches. She didn't want to think about too long. You sure? Eagle asked. She nodded. He keeps it locked unless he's expecting a shipment, she said. And the office is in the back. That's where the safe is, she said. We're not cracking that safe from here, Shadow said. Even I'm not that good. You shouldn't be trying, Ruth muttered. I wasn't offering. Shadow switched to another camera. This one showed the main office, fake wood desk, open blinds, computer against the far wall. If I can get a device on that network, he said, I can clone his hard drive in an hour, maybe less. Meaning someone has to go in, Blaze said. Meaning someone has to go in, he repeated. The garage seemed to exhale at the same time. They stood at the edge of a line they'd never crossed. Charity rides, toy drives, escorting survivors to shelters, working with cops, not around them. This was different. And call me crazy, Blaze said, but I'm guessing we don't just trot up in vests and ask to use his Wi-Fi. Shadow didn't smile. We don't have to, he said. He leaves that computer on all night. Security footage shows light from the monitor after midnight. If we time it with one of his shipments, he brought up a calendar window. Shipments. Shipments. Security footage shows light from the monitor after midnight. Dates and times pulled from sloppy emails and half-hidden manifests. Lines of text cascaded down until they landed on a block highlighted in yellow. Tomorrow, he said, 11 p.m. Semi comes in. 6 high-end vehicles out. 3 state lines. High risk, high reward. Tank said, "We're not just talking theft." Shadow said, "We're talking interstate transport. That invites federal eyes." Ruth sat forward. "Federal eyes are exactly what we want," she said. Eagle's gaze sharpened. "You still have that contact?" he asked. Ruth hesitated, then nodded. "Agent Morales," she said. "We butted heads over funding once, but she cared. She works vehicle theft now. Interstate. If we hand her something she can't ignore, she shows up." Eagle said, "She's not going to sanction any of this." Ruth warned, "Not officially. She can't say, 'Go break into a warehouse and film what you see.'" Hogan, "She doesn't have to," Eagle said. "She just has to know exactly where to be when the clock hits 11. He turned back to Shadow. "Can we do this without breaking anything?" he asked. "No cars move. No locks cut that don't absolutely have to be. We're witnesses, not raiders." Shadow looked at the screen, then at Aisha. "If everything goes right," he said, "we're ghosts. We go in while his guys are busy. Cameras loop. We get our footage. Clone his system. Get out. By the time he notices, Morales is already rolling up with warrants. And if everything goes wrong," Tank asked. Shadow's mouth twisted. "Then we run," he said. "Fast." Aisha swallowed. "You can't go in there," she said. He'll have guys. Guns. He always brags about being ready for trouble. Day. We're not going in loud." Eagle said. "No colors, no bikes. No patch gives him a photo op." He paused. "We'll tail the semi a quarter-mile back," he said. "Park out of sight. Go in on foot. No more than 15 of us. Less if we can manage." Ruth's attention slid back to Aisha. "We're not taking you," she said. "I wasn't." Aisha started. She'd been about to say she wasn't asking, that she knew better, but something in her chest rebelled. "You need what's in that safe." "Right. And you don't get the safe. The papers he doesn't put in the computer, eventually," Shadow said. "We get what we can digitally first. He keeps things off the computer on purpose," she said. "You said that yourself. The really bad stuff, he doesn't trust screens." Shadow didn't argue. "I'm the only one who knows the code," she said. "If you wait until later, he might change it. If you go in, we still ruin his day. He might change it." Tank said. The room spun very slightly as every gaze came back to her again. She said instead, "No, absolutely not. You just got out. We are not walking you back into his world." "I don't have to go inside," Aisha said. "I can stay in the truck, tell you where things are, which warehouse is which, how the offices connect. I've been there." "You haven't? Which warehouse is which, how the offices connect?" he said. "I know," she said, "and I don't want to be in that place," she said. "But if this is how we stop him, I don't want to be the reason you fall short." Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. Ruth closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them. "And I don't want to be." "He'll drive," she said. "Whole time." "He'll drive," she said. "Whole time." Eagle nodded once, slowly. "Non-negotiables," he said. "She doesn't leave the vehicle. If anything smells wrong, we bail. We're not heroes. We're witnesses." He looked around at the faces in the garage. These were people who'd signed up for charity runs, not Black Ops field trips. "This isn't a club vote," he said. Anyone who doesn't want in on this step back. No shame. No judgment. No one moved. The rain picked up again. No shame. No judgment. Eagle said, Shadow, you keep digging. Get me everything you can on his shipments. Ruth, call Morales. Feel her out without giving away more than you have to. He turned back to the screen showing Warehouse 3, the grainy gray rectangle of Ronald's kingdom. And tomorrow night, he said quietly, we walk into his shadow and turn on every light we have. Night surrounded Hayes' auto salvage like a secret it had been keeping for years. From the highway, the place looked abandoned. The chain gate locked. The main office dark. Floodlights, casting long, pale streaks across stacked metal and twisted frames. But inside the silence, there was movement hiding in the bones of the scrapyard. A quarter-mile away, the iron riders waited in the shadow of an old grain silo. They had come without their vests, without their patches, without a single symbol that could tie them to anything except the long, dark road. Trucks idled low. Von sat still, engines cooling in the cold air. It felt like the breath before a storm. Inside the lead truck, Aisha sat beside Sister Ruth, hands balled into fists inside the sleeves of her hoodie. Her reflection hovered on the window glass, pale and tense, overlaying the distant glow of the salvage yard and the long skeletal rows of crushed cars. Her reflection hovered on the window glass, pale and tense. Sister Ruth glanced at her gently. She said, let us do the dangerous part. You can wait at the safe house. Aisha shook her head slowly. You will not know which building has the safe. You will not know where he hides things. You should not have to go through this. Ruth murmured, that was not the question. Aisha said. From behind them came the soft crunch of boots on gravel. Eagle appeared at the door, framed by night, rain misting his beard. We are moving, he said. Shadow has the semi on satellite. It is close. He reached in and rested a hand lightly on Aisha's shoulder. You know the layout better than anyone, he said. When we ask, we need you to speak fast. Aisha nodded. Fence line, Warehouse 3, office in the back right corner, safe behind the calendar. Good. Eagle said, if anything feels wrong, you call it. No one dies for Ronald Hayes. Then he shut the door. If anything feels wrong, headlights killed, engines throttled low, Aisha said. Their small convoy rolled onto the road in darkness, slipping through the night in borrowed anonymity. Aisha breathed in slowly. The riders seemed almost ghost-like. In for 4, hold for 4. Out for 4, counting like Ruth had taught her. Her heartbeat still climbed against her ribs like it wanted out. Ruth eased the truck to a stop. Engines cut off. Shadow spoke quietly through the radio from the back van. Looping cameras now. The system thinks it is yesterday. You are ghosts. A low hum rose on the wind. Aisha twisted in her seat just as the semi came into view, headlights bright. Engine groaning under its load. The big rig slowed, then turned down the gravel drive leading into the yard, exactly like the schedule Shadow had uncovered. Figures in hoodies and reflective vests moved to meet it. The roll-up door of Warehouse 3 pitched open like a mouth. 4 men on the dock, Shadow murmured. 1 forklift operator. No sign of Ronald. Eagle gave the order, exactly like the schedule Shadow had uncovered. 1 forklift operator. Slipping along the fence line, wire cutters whispered through chain links. Pallets of wreckage cast long shadows that swallowed them one by one. Ruth kept her eyes forward. Aisha hugged herself, breath short. She knew those warehouse smells, that concrete, the way sound traveled too far, and footsteps carried more than they should. Shadow's voice remained steady. You have 30 feet of blind zone behind the pallet tower. That is your tunnel. Eagle and Tank slipped into the tunnel. Blaze followed, low to the ground. Camera clipped to her vest. They moved like they had rehearsed it for years. not hours. Inventory recorded. Tank whispered. Shadow, run these plates. Already on it, Shadow replied. Every one of these cars is reported stolen, all from different states. Shadow replied. Aisha swallowed hard. She could imagine the warehouse in her head, the rows of cars, the reeking puddles, the walls of fake temporary tags Ronald printed in the office while she pretended to do homework at the desk beside him. You are approaching the office, Shadow said. Door is open. Room is empty. Eagle stepped inside. Aisha could hear every small sound through the radio, the click of his boots, the hum of the fluorescent bulb. Her breath hitched. Back right wall, she whispered before she could stop herself. Calendar with the red-headed model. Safe is behind it. Copy, Eagle said. The scrape of paper shifted as he pushed the calendar aside. Metal gleamed in the dim light. He began to turn the dial. 2, 8, 4, 5, 1, 9. Aisha stopped breathing. The same numbers she had heard in the dark for over a year. The numbers he had whispered while thinking she slept. Her mother's birthday turned into a lock on his crimes. The safe clicked open. Eagle inhaled sharply. Shadow, he said. Voice different now. Lower. You need to see this. The camera fed the images straight to Shadow's laptop. Aisha could not see them, but she could hear the silence that followed. A deep, terrible silence. Ledgers, Eagle said softly. Cash, transfers, payoffs, names, a beat, and photographs. Shadow swore under his breath. Blaze whispered something sharp. Tank said nothing at all. Ruth closed her eyes. Aisha felt the world tilt around her. On the radio, Tank whispered, he is extorting half the county. Shadow came back in a tight voice. Copy everything. Do not touch a single page. Clones and video only. Outside, the rumble of another engine reached them. Shadow snapped back on the mic. Pick up approaching yard. It is him. Ronald is coming in. Ruth's knuckles whitened on the wheel. We are out of time, she said. Eagle did not panic. He worked fast. Steady. He framed every page in the camera, letting the lens capture names, signatures, dates, the faces of men who thought they could hide behind expensive suits and quiet meetings. Then he shut the safe, reset the dial, and let the calendar fall back into place. Then he shut the safe, letting the lens capture names, team, voice clipped and urgent. Out. Bodies moved fast. Footsteps whispered. Doors swung and stilled. Aisha watched the fence line with eyes that burned. Shadow said, he is on the dock. He does not know. Move. Move now. One by one. The riders slipped into the dark and back toward the trucks. The van door slammed softly. Eagle climbed into the back seat of Ruth's truck and pulled it shut behind him. Ruth fired the engine. Talk, she said. Eagle leaned forward between the seats. Breath hard. Face lit by the dim overhead light. We got it, he said. All of it. Ledgers. Cash routes. Photos. He has been blackmailing officials. God help the girls in those rooms. We have it on film. Aisha turned slowly toward him. Her voice was low and steady. He used my mother's birthday. He used her to hide those photos. He kept them behind her date. Ruth's head bowed for a moment. Aisha looked back out the window, jaw clenched, face lit by the dim overhead light. She said, not anymore. Drive. Ruth pressed the accelerator. Gravel sprayed behind the tires. The salvage yard shrank in the mirror, the floodlights blurring into streaks of white against the dark. Behind them, the safe waited, full of the rot that had been poisoning the county for years. Ahead of them, dawn was coming, and so was justice. The first siren wailed just before sunrise. Aisha heard it in her dreams. before she heard it in the garage. In the dream, it was for her, a sound that meant run. When she jolted awake on the cot in the storage room, heart pounding, the siren was still there, thin and far away, weaving around the softer sounds of the garage, waking up voices, footsteps, the hiss of the coffee pot. She pushed the blanket back and sat up, thin and far away, dust drifting through it like slow-motion snow. For a second she didn't know what time it was or what day. Weaving around the softer sounds of the garage, waking up, the safe opening, those words he had said about what they had found ahead of them. Then she remembered Eagle's voice in the truck, and so was Justice. The faint light from the high window painted a pale bar across the concrete. Dawn was coming. Shadow was at the folding table. She pulled on her hoodie and stepped out into the main bay. Empty energy drink cans crowded his elbow like spent shell casings. He had not slept. That much was obvious. Eagle stood beside him, eyes bloodshot, watching the screen, arms folded. The TV in the corner was on mute. Tank and Blaze hovered nearby. A developing story banner crawled along the bottom of the screen, red and insistent, looping the local morning show. "Drink," Ruth said. Ruth appeared from the tiny kitchen and pressed a mug into Aisha's hands before she could say a word. "What?" Aisha asked. Shadow didn't look up. "I sent it," he said, 3 hours ago. Encrypted packet to Morales. You are going to want something warm when this hits. To a couple of investigative reporters I trust about as far as I can throw their servers." Eagle grunted. "You told them what they were looking at." "To a federal task force hub," Shadow said. "Not in Putri. Footage, ledger scans, files." He tapped a key and read it out loud. And one line in the subject field, "Active trafficking and interstate theft tied to Hayes Auto Salvage. Immediate action recommended." "And the sirens?" Aisha asked. Eagle nodded toward the TV, voice flat. He said, "On screen." The anchor touched a finger to her earpiece, the manufactured brightness falling from her face. The home organization tip's graphic vanished, replaced with a shaky helicopter shot of the salvage yard. Shadow unmuted the TV. "Breaking news from the east side." The anchor was saying, "Federal agents and state investigators have descended on Hayes Auto Salvage this morning, in what sources describe as a major organized crime and trafficking raid." The view cut to ground level, yellow tape, flashing lights, jackets with bold letters across the back, men and women moving with purpose, not curiosity. Aisha walked toward the TV without meaning to. A reporter stood at the edge of the lot, hair frizzing in the damp air, voice tight with adrenaline. "Behind me you can see federal agents executing a search warrant at Hayes Auto Salvage," she said. "Sources tell us this investigation involves not just stolen vehicles and falsified titles, but potentially a multi-state trafficking network targeting vulnerable teenagers." Her words blurred for a second. The picture was everything. Agents swarmed the warehouses. One team moved toward Warehouse 3. Another peeled off toward the main office. The camera zoomed in on the line of vehicles they had already pulled from the trailers, officers photographing plates under the harsh morning light. "They have our footage," Shadow murmured. "They know exactly what to look for. This is procedural now." Aisha's fingers tightened around the mug until her knuckles went white. "Look," Ruth said quietly. 2 agents escorted a man out of the main office in handcuffs. His face was turned just enough toward the camera for the whole world to see. Ronald Hayes, jaw clenched, hair uncombed, still in the same jacket he had worn to the lawyer's office. The chyrons changed. Local businessmen arrested. Salvage yard, at center of trafficking probe. Ronald tried to twist away from the camera, shouted something, No one could hear over the sirens and shouted commands, but it did not matter. The image was already captured, already moving, already spreading. Aisha realized she was shaking. Salvage yard, at center of trafficking probe, already moving. Breathe. Salvage yard, at center of trafficking probe. Aisha realized she was shaking. On screen, the reporter kept talking. According to documents obtained by this station, she said, Hayes allegedly falsified hundreds of titles and used his salvage operation as a cover for moving stolen vehicles across state lines. Federal officials now say they are also investigating allegations of human trafficking and the exploitation of minors. The footage cut to a still image, ledger pages, handwritten notes, arrows circling dollar amounts. Aisha recognized the ledger lines instantly. She had seen them under the harsh office light when Eagle flipped them for the camera. Shadow smiled grimly. They used our scan, he said. Stamped and authenticated now. Chain of custody. Started the second Morales hit print. As if summoned by his name, Agent Morales appeared on screen, speaking at a quick, controlled press huddle. The lower third identified her as Special Agent in Charge, stamped and authenticated now. Speaking at a quick, she said, Today's actions are the result of that information. We have recovered stolen property, financial records, and, more importantly, we have located several juveniles we believe are victims of trafficking. And Aisha's lungs forgot how to work. She whispered, They found Interstate Vehicle and Trafficking Task Force. We received credible information indicating that Hayes Auto Salvage was the nexus of a multi-layer criminal enterprise, she said. Morales continued. 4 teenage girls were found on the property, in a concealed room. All had been reported missing. They are now in protective care, receiving medical attention and support. 4. The number hit like a physical thing, in her chest. Something sharp and cold and furious twisted. Those girls could have been her. They could have been anyone. Shadow, Eagle said quietly. Clip that. Save it. Every second. Already doing it. Shadow replied. The broadcast cut back to the anchor desk. Her voice had taken on that somber tone networks reserved for tragedies and scandals. We also have new information this morning, she said, about the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club. Previously accused on social media of abducting Hayes' stepdaughter, law enforcement sources now tell us that the club may have played a key role as whistleblowers in bringing this case to light. The room went very still. They did not just walk it back, Blaze said softly. They flipped it. The screen showed B-roll of past charity rides, riders handing out toys, Aisha passing water bottles to little kids in the summer heat, Eagle grilling burgers at a fundraiser, Ruth talking to a cluster of women in shelter yard chairs. This club has a long history of community outreach, a voiceover said. From charity rides to domestic violence, support. The Iron Riders have built a reputation as protectors. In light of new information, many are now questioning the online smear campaign that painted them as kidnappers. Comments flashed across the bottom in a quick montage. I was wrong about these bikers. We owe them an apology. They saved those girls. Aisha reached out and touched the screen with her fingertips, left a small smudge over her own frozen face in one of the photos. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Ruth blinked. You want me to? Aisha fumbled it out herself. A new message sat at the top from a number she recognized and had not expected to ever see again. Her aunt. I saw the news. I am so sorry. I did not know. Ronald told me you were lying. I believed him. Can you ever forgive me? The garage seemed to fade for a second. I did not know. Ronald told me you were lying, replaced by a cramped living room. her aunt saying, always wanting attention, while Aisha sat on the edge of the couch swallowing her words. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then her thumbs moved. I am safe. That is what matters. I will think about it. She hit send before she could soften it. When she looked up, Eagle was watching her, not the TV. You did that, he said. She frowned. I did not rate anything. You did. You sent a text, he said. You broke the silence. Without that, we are still sitting in this garage, blind. Ronald is still playing Father of the Year. Those girls are still in that room. He nodded toward the screen, where agents were leading out a small cluster of figures under blankets, faces blurred to protect their identities. That is on you, kid, he said. In the best way, her throat closed up. She swallowed hard, feeling the heat behind her eyes, and refusing to look away from the screen. Shadow's laptop chimed, sharp and insistent. Here we go, he said. Lawyer time. He clicked, and a statement popped up from Harold Vance's office. It was already being quoted on the news. The so-called evidence against Mr. Hayes, the anchor read, was obtained illegally and constitutes an egregious violation of his rights. We will be petitioning the court to suppress any materials derived from this vigilante activity. Shadow snorted. Of course he is spinning it that way, Blaze said. Blame the bikers. Try to poison the tree. Will it work? Aisha asked quietly. Can they throw all of it out because of us? Shadow shook his head. No, we are not cops, he said. We are private citizens. We gave a tip. The feds got their own warrants, did their own search, seized their own evidence. They are not relying on our body cams in court. The only thing our footage did was tell them where to point. Ruth leaned back against the kitchen doorframe, eyes on the screen where legal commentators had already started to dissect the statement. He will drag this through every appeal he can, she said. His lawyer is not wrong about one thing. He is going to scream about us until his last breath. Let him scream, Eagle said. His words put him here. Our receipts keep him here. On TV, the camera panned back to the yard. Yellow evidence markers dotted the concrete near Warehouse 3. Technicians moved in white suits, photographing, bagging, labeling, chain of custody, stamping time onto horror so it could not wriggle away. Aisha wrapped her hands around her mug again, letting the heat soak into her fingers. All her life, Ronald's version of events had been louder than hers, more polished, backed by money and adult voices, and the easy authority of a man who could charm anyone who was not locked in a house with him. For the first time, his story was not the one the world believed. She watched him being led to a transport van, surrounded by agents, flashbulbs popping. He looked smaller on the screen, not physically, just diminished, shorn of the invisible power he used to have when he walked into a room, and everyone assumed he was the reasonable one. Ruth stepped closer and bumped her shoulder gently against Aisha's. How does it feel? She asked, seeing him in cuffs. Aisha considered. It feels real, she said slowly, like I am not crazy. Like all those nights happened to someone the law can see, not just to me. Eagle took a slow breath, then clapped his hands once, drawing every eye away from the screen. Okay, he said, they have the ball now. Feds, prosecutors, the lawyers in suits. That part of the fight moves to rooms we do not run. He looked around at the faces in the garage. But ours, he said, ours is right here. We got kids who need rides to shelters. We got sponsors who need calls back. Shorn of the invisible power he used to have when he walked into a room, and everyone assumed he was the reasonable one. He nodded toward the TV one last time. He said, we keep doing what we do, he said. But ours. On the screen, We got a community trying to decide who they are after what they saw on their breakfast news. The raid, the ledgers, where the Chiron now called Hayes a suspected trafficker, and the Iron Riders community advocates, each cycle etched it deeper into the audience's mind. Aisha turned away at last, heart still thudding but lighter, in a way she did not entirely trust yet. Outside, the sirens faded. The morning brightened. For the first time in a long time, she let herself imagine a future where Ronald Hayes existed only in courtrooms and case files, where his reach ended at concrete walls and steel bars. The girls under blankets, something in her began, slowly, to unclench. 3 days after the raid, for the first time in a long time, the bay doors were rolled halfway up, letting in warm afternoon light and the smell of hot asphalt. Motorcycles lined the cracked driveway in uneven rows, chrome catching the sun in sharp flashes. Inside, where his reach ended at concrete walls and steel bars, boxes of donated clothes, crates of canned food, hand-drawn, thank you signs scrawled on poster board. She let herself imagine a future where Ronald Hayes existed only in courtrooms and case files. Thank you, riders. Aisha stood at the edge of the bay, letting in warm afternoon light and the smell of hot asphalt, crates of canned food. Some drivers honked and lifted a hand. Others rolled down windows just long enough to shout, one shoulder against the cool metal frame, or appreciate you. Watching cars creep past more slowly than they used to. Across the street, most of the flyers dropped off on the workbench, carried the same short line in thick black marker. You did good. And set it carefully on the curb. She taped a note to the side, gave the garage a quick, stepped out with a grocery bag, then hurried back into her car and drove off. Before the light changed and they were gone again. A woman parked, shy nod. You know what the strangest part is? A socket wrench clicked rhythmically, wiping grease from her fingers with a rag. Same people who used to pull their kids away from us at the gas station now want selfies. Tank grunted from beneath a half-disassembled bike. Wait until they remember we still swear, he rumbled. Blaze said. Blaze snorted, but there was a wary edge under the humor. Blaze said. Her throat felt tight. Halo never survives the third curse word. Blaze snorted. The notes. The awkward waves. Halo never survives the third curse word. But the swing from villain to hero made her dizzy. The notes. Halo never survives the third curse word. Blaze snorted. Halo never survives the third curse word. To soak in the honks. To soak in the honks. The notes. Do you like it? Same people who used to pull their kids away from us at the gas station now want selfies. He paused beside her. Crowd is getting bigger every day. He said, the rest is noise. Crowd is getting bigger every day. Shadow stuck his head out, hair sticking up, blue light from the laptop still clinging to his face. Same people who used to pull their kids away from us at the gas station now want selfies. But the swing from villain to hero made her dizzy. The rest is noise. The low murmur of the garage shifted. Shadow stuck his head out. The office door banged open. Ruth asked. Conversation thin. Shadow held up his phone. Conversation thin. The office door banged open. Stepping out from the tiny kitchen and flicking soap from her hands, conspiracy, interstate theft, money laundering, and some extras I cannot pronounce before noon. Morales had a question. And the others? Blaze asked. In deep, Shadow said. His crew, stepping out from the tiny kitchen and flicking soap from her hands, the inspector, the clerk. Morales says, more names are coming. His crew, and some extras, I cannot pronounce before noon. And the girls, Hayes is officially charged. Turns out blackmail ledgers are very persuasive reading. They are safe. Shadow's tone changed. In care, getting medical attention and counseling. He said, though, He looked from Eagle to Ruth, then to Aisha. She wants to know if you would be willing to meet them. The garage fell quiet except for the far-off rumble of a passing truck. Morales had a question. Where? And the girls, the shelter sat behind a peeling white church on the far side of town. Aisha stared at the grease-stained concrete near her shoes. From the outside, it looked like a tired community center. Inside, it smelled like cheap coffee, hiding in plain sight, and the faint metallic edge of worry that clung to places where people waited for bad things to stop happening. Aisha sat on a sagging couch in a small room with buzzing fluorescent lights and a humming air conditioner. Laundry detergent. She kept smoothing it, as if she could flatten out her nerves by force. Ruth sat beside her, hands folded loosely. The fabric on the armrest was rough under her palm. Agent Morales leaned against a metal filing cabinet, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, badge clipped at her hip. You do not have to do this, Morales said. If you change your mind, I walk out there and say you are not ready, feet planted like she could anchor the whole room if it tried to shift. Aisha looked at the muted television mounted in the corner, where some daytime talk show host laughed silently, while a headline at the bottom of the screen mentioned the salvage yard case in a single crawling line. Will they know it was me? She asked. They know someone reached out, Morales said. Someone sent a message that brought the riders to that motel. Someone cracked open more than one door. They do not know your name or your history unless you decide to tell them. Ruth bumped her knee gently. You are allowed to say no, Ruth said. You are allowed to say not yet. You are allowed to protect yourself first. Aisha thought of the concrete room, the hidden door, the way Morales had said the word victims in front of cameras, thought of the way her own fear had tasted, metallic and thick, when she believed no one would ever see what was happening. I used to lie awake. Someone sent a message that brought the riders to that motel. Aisha thought of the concrete room. If I was the first or just the easiest to reach, wondering if there were other girls. If it helps them to see that someone got out, she said, that someone believed them enough to fight for them, then I want them to have that. If it helps them to see that someone got out, she said. All right, she said, one at a time. You do not owe them specifics. All right. She slipped out. The first girl walked in with her shoulders hunched so high it looked like they were trying to touch her ears. She was younger than Aisha had expected, hair pulled back in a rushed ponytail, bruises blooming soft yellow on one cheek. Suspicion sat heavy in her eyes, dull and sharp at the same time. This is Aisha, Morales said. She knows a few things about rooms that feel like traps. I was wrong. You are her, she said. The one who sent that text. I am a girl who sent a message on a bad night. Aisha said, that is all. The girl swallowed. They told us, she said, that if you had not done that, we would still be there, that nobody would have looked that hard. They told us. The girl swallowed. She said, I was wrong, she said. They talked a little after that, not about details. I hope you get to be wrong about that too. The girl studied Aisha with a kind of raw calculation. About sleep. About how you could be terrified and brave at the same time without one canceling the other out. Are you sure? Another came in, and another. When the first girl left, about what it felt like when somebody finally listened and did not ask. Another came in, and another, like clay that had been fired into something that would not crumble so easily. Warm and dusty. Wind trickled through the open window of Ruth's truck. Warm and dusty. Warm and dusty. How do you feel? Ruth asked. Tired. Another came in, but the good kind, Ruth asked, and another. As they crested a slight rise, the neon sign of the motel glowed faintly to the right, its blue letters flickering against the early evening haze. Aisha felt hollowed out and heavier at once. Can we drive by? She asked. Ruth hesitated only briefly before turning the wheel. Can we drive by? And another. The paint was more peeled. Up close. Up close. The neon sign of the motel glowed faintly to the right. Though, damp carpet and old fear baked into concrete. Though, you sure about this? Damp carpet. The number plate was crooked. Aisha said, but I think I want to see it anyway. They stepped out. The air was thick and warm. Somewhere a television blared through a too-thin wall. A soda machine hummed irritably near the office. The door of room 12 was closed. The wood around the handle was scarred. The number plate was crooked. This is where everything changed, Aisha said softly. Ruth nodded. This is where everything changed, Aisha said softly. The motel owner leaned out of the office, a cigarette tucked behind one ear and a suspicious squint in her eyes. The number plate was crooked. Her shoulders loosened a fraction. You with those bikers? She asked. Sometimes, Ruth said. Today we are just visiting a door. The woman snorted. That door has seen worse than most churches, she said. You want it. Take it. I am going to have to redo half this dump after all that news. What if you did not? Aisha asked. She asked. Did not what? Aisha asked. Aisha said. What if one room was different? A breeze rattled the cracked plastic vacancy sign. We know people who fix places, Ruth said carefully. Who paint, who wire, who build, people who can make a room feel like a harbor instead of a trap. If you were open to it, this could be more than a stop on the way down. It could be a place to grab hold of something. Safe costs money, the owner said bluntly. Extra locks, better phones, training. Who is paying for all that? Our phones have not stopped ringing since the raid, Ruth said. Sponsors who want to make things right. Lawyers who owe us favors. Agents who know where grant money hides. And me, she added, who can be very annoying when I decide something should exist. We could make one room, Aisha said. Just one to start. Just one to start. And people like you, with a sign that says, you are not alone. The owner looked from Aisha to Ruth and back to the door of room 12. With a phone that goes straight to a hotline that sends people like her and people like you, with a sign that says, you were one of them, the owner said quietly, thinking. The woman rolled the unlit cigarette between her fingers. She said at last, if you promise me something. What? Ruth asked. If some girl shows up at that door in the middle of the night and asks for help, the owner said, you people come, no matter what they are saying about you online that week. Ruth's smile was small and fierce. That, she said, we can promise. Before Aisha could answer, headlights swept across the lot. A cab pulled in fast and stopped crooked near the office. The back door flew open. A woman climbed out, clutching a duffel bag to her chest. Her hair was messy, her clothes thrown on in a hurry. A poorly covered black bruise shadowed one eye beneath heavy makeup. She looked from the office to the row of doors, panic and determination wrestling on her face. I heard, she said, voice shaking. I heard there was a room here that helps people. Is that real? The owner glanced at Ruth, panic and determination wrestling on her face. A poorly covered black bruise shadowed one eye beneath heavy makeup. Then, at Aisha, voice calm, you came to the right place. She said, eyes steady, let us get you inside. Come on. Aisha looked up at the flickering neon. As they guided the woman toward room 12, the light did not feel like a warning. It felt like a beacon. By the time her name was called, Aisha's hands had gone completely numb. She sat at the narrow wooden table in the family courtroom, knees pressed together, palms flat against the cool varnish. The room hovered in that strange zone between official and shabby, high ceilings, humming fluorescent lights, threadbare blue carpet that had seen better years. A faded state flag drooped behind the judge's bench. The air smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and nerves. On the other side of the aisle, Harold Vance sat in a crisp suit, legal pad aligned perfectly square to the edge of the table. Beside him, the chair meant for his client sat empty, cuffs and federal transport having made an appearance impossible. Ronald Hayes existed here only as a name on the docket and a smudge of rage in Aisha's memory. Next to her sat Sister Ruth in pressed slacks and a blouse she only wore when she wanted people with power to take her seriously. On Ruth's other side, Eagle wore his least intimidating clothes: dark button-down, no vest, hair tied back. It did not make him look any less like the kind of man who'd stand between a girl and the world. Agent Morales sat on the row behind them, close enough to lean forward if needed. Badge tucked away. Presence unmistakable. The judge flipped a page on the file in front of her. Aisha Reynolds, she said. 17. Current placement. Temporary certified safe house. Under the oversight of Ms. Ruth Carter and affiliated organization Iron Riders Community Support. Her eyes lifted, scanning the room, weighing. We are here to determine custody and guardianship going forward, she continued. Given the related criminal proceedings against Mr. Hayes, this hearing also intersects with safety concerns. Everyone ready to proceed? Ready. Your Honor, Vance said smoothly. Ruth inclined her head. Ready? Your Honor, this hearing also intersects with safety concerns. She sat up instead. Mr. Vance, the judge said, you're appearing on behalf of Mr. Hayes. Yes, Your Honor, he said. My client is regrettably unable to attend due to what we contend are unfounded charges. Nevertheless, Your Honor, he turned slightly. Yes, before anything else, he said, we move to exclude any reference to alleged criminal acts or so-called evidence derived from the activities of the Iron Riders. You're here in what capacity? In our view, tainted by vigilante interference, under the table. Aisha's leg jolted, nodding to the back, a silent easing. The judge tapped her pen once, thinking, Agent Morales, she said, nodding to the back. You're here in what capacity? We move to exclude any reference to alleged criminal acts or so-called evidence derived from the activities of the Iron Riders. Your Honor, Morales said. Your Honor. Standing. The judge studied her for a moment. We move to exclude any reference to alleged criminal acts or so-called evidence derived from the activities of the Iron Riders. Standing, she said. Ms. Morales, step up, she said, raised her hand. I can speak to the integrity of the federal case and to the role of the Iron Riders as civilian whistleblowers. She sat. Why don't we clear that up first? Voice calm. Why don't we clear that up first? The judge said. We move to exclude any reference to alleged criminal acts or so-called evidence derived from the activities of the Iron Riders. She replied. She said, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Why don't we clear that up first? The judge said, we move to exclude any reference to alleged criminal acts or so-called evidence derived from the activities of the Iron Riders. The judge said. A faint ripple of amusement passed through the courtroom. Can you address Mr. Vance's implication? Specifically, was federal evidence obtained through unlawful means at the direction of this motorcycle club? No, Your Honor. Morales said. The Iron Riders provided an anonymous tip accompanied by digital material indicating probable criminal activity. Based on that information, helpful to point us where to look. All evidence we intend to present in criminal proceedings was collected by sworn officers executing those warrants, so the body cam footage, Morales said, helpful to point us where to look. Morales said. Not the foundation of our case, Morales said. Morales said. Specifically, a faint ripple of amusement passed through the courtroom. All evidence we intend to present in criminal proceedings was collected by sworn officers executing those warrants. The Iron Riders provided an anonymous tip accompanied by digital material indicating probable criminal activity. The Iron Riders provided an anonymous tip accompanied by digital material indicating probable criminal activity. We received footage obtained without Mr. Morales said evenly. The Iron Riders provided an anonymous tip accompanied by digital material indicating probable criminal activity. It served as probable cause to request lawful authority, Morales said. We received footage obtained without Mr. A faint ripple of amusement passed through the courtroom. The Iron Riders provided an anonymous tip accompanied by digital material indicating probable criminal activity. It served as probable cause to request lawful authority. Without wandering into matters best left to the criminal court, Morales returned to her seat. Without wandering into matters best left to the criminal court, we did not rely on that footage as formal evidence. Limit graphic detail. This is still, however, a custody hearing. We received footage obtained without Mr. Thank you. 4 minor victims locked in a concealed room with shipping schedules posted nearby. She said, I will, but please remain available. Morales returned to her seat. Primarily, the judge turned her attention to the table. Miss Reynolds, she said, I know you have given statements before. I'm afraid I have to ask you to give one more. In your own words. No interruptions. Aisha's pulse roared in her ears. She stood anyway. Her voice wobbled on the first sentence. But she did not let it break. About the rules taped to the refrigerator. About the lock removed from her door. About raised voices and raised hands that always left marks in places easy to hide. She did not detail the worst of it. She did not have to. About the rules taped to the refrigerator. Aisha's pulse roared in her ears. They showed up. Eagle's hands were folded so tightly. His knuckles were white. And when you ran, the judge asked gently, what were you hoping for? She did not have to. Aisha said, I did not expect anyone to come when I sent that message. I just did not know what else to do. Her eyes flicked toward Eagle and Ruth. But they came, she said. But they came, the judge asked gently. The judge nodded slowly. But she did not let it break. Aisha's pulse roared in her ears. I just did not know what else to do. The judge nodded slowly. Ruth squeezed her hand once. Aisha's pulse roared in her ears. The neighbor is not the arresting officer. Aisha's legs felt weak as she lowered herself back into the chair. The judge said. Her eyes flicked toward Eagle and Ruth. Vance rose smoothly. Your Honor, he said. Aisha let out a soft, my client took her in after her mother's passing, provided food, housing, schooling. Yes, he enforced discipline. Aisha let out a soft, involuntary sound. Eagle's jaw flexed, and he is now being painted as a monster based on untested allegations. Vance continued. Aisha let out a soft, he turned slightly, gesturing toward Eagle. These individuals may believe they are helping, he said, but they are bikers, not social workers. They operate on adrenaline and a savior complex. And he is now being painted as a monster based on untested allegations. He said, with respect, Your Honor, I ask the court to consider whether it is in this child's best interest to remain in the care of a group currently entangled in a high-profile criminal matter and public controversy. Not social workers, he said. The Riders are registered as a non-profit with the state. We work in partnership with shelters and advocacy groups. What we have here is a deeply grieving young woman whose perception has been colored by trauma and by undue influence. She kept her voice level. I am certified as a foster guardian. The only reason we are entangled in anything, but there was steel under it, Aisha said. Vance opened his mouth. The judge held up a hand. I have read your filings. Ms. Carter, she said, but there was steel under it. Sit down. Ruth obeyed, though her shoulders stayed tight. The judge shuffled papers, then set them aside. All right, she said. I do not need more argument on who has the shiniest credentials, though her shoulders stayed tight. All right, then set them aside. Hayes's custody, she said. Yes, Your Honor, Aisha said, but there was steel under it. I will not go back. The judge shuffled papers. Given the pending federal charges, she said, Mr. Given the pending federal charges, she said, Your Honor. At this time, Vance's mouth flat, but he said nothing. As for placement, the judge continued. Ms. Carter, you are already an approved caregiver. You have presented a plan for continued education, counseling, and eventual relocation to a community where Ms. Reynolds can have some anonymity. Ruth nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, the judge said. Yes. She took a breath. Temporary guardianship of Ms. Agent Morales has submitted a supporting statement regarding safety concerns. Ruth Carter, with oversight by the State Family Services Department. She said, Mr. Hayes's parental rights are formally suspended pending the outcome of his criminal proceedings and any subsequent petitions for termination. Reynolds is awarded to Ms. For the record, the judge added, eyes softening for just a moment. Ms. Reynolds, the court believes you. That is reflected here today. Aisha's vision blurred. She blinked hard, swallowing around the lump in her throat. Yes, Your Honor, she managed. Thank you. The judge moved on to the next case. Your Honor, people shifted. Chairs squeaked. Doors opened. Outside in the hallway, the air felt cooler. Aisha leaned back against the wall. The texture of the paint rough against her spine. Ruth turned to her, eyes bright. You are coming home with me. Outside in the hallway. Officially this time, home. Officially this time. Is that okay with you? Ruth asked. The word no longer tasted poisonous. You have a say here. The image pulled a laugh out of Aisha. Aisha looked up at her. With you, she said, suddenly uncertain. Is that okay with you? Yeah, then smirked. Well, Eagle checked his phone. News travels fast. The garage already knows. Blaze says, if we do not get back soon, well, news travels fast, shaky and real. As they walk toward the exit, Blaze says, if we do not get back soon, the image pulled a laugh out of Aisha. Hey Aisha, this is Laura. Tank is going to name your old cot after you and charge rent. Heard the hearing went your way? Ruth's cousin. A text from an unknown number with a city code she did not recognize. You get the key. Shaky and real. Quito. Sunlight on fresh paint. We even put a lock on the inside of the door, a bed with a simple quilt. Underneath. One more line. We would be honored to have you, if and when you are ready. This is Laura. Outside. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine rumbled. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and stepped into the sun. A girl between what had been decided for her and what she might decide next. By the time jury selection finished, the courthouse felt less like a building and more like a pressure cooker. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and stepped into the sun. A motorcycle engine rumbled. Her hands were folded so tightly in her lap that the knuckles burned. Aisha sat on a hard wooden bench outside the main courtroom. Attorneys with files, reporters with cameras, People moved past in steady streams. Aisha sat on a hard wooden bench outside the main courtroom. Attorneys with files. A flat screen played a loop of local news. Clerks juggling stacks of paper. Not current, but that funeral photo again. The one Ronald's people had once used to paint her as a liar. Now it appeared under very different fonts. Key witness in trafficking trial. Now it appeared under very different fonts. She looked away. Key witness in trafficking trial. One foot tapping a slow, measured rhythm. Eagle leaned against the wall, arms folded. Teen, at center of salvage case to testify. Remember, Ruth murmured. You are not the one on trial. I know, Aisha said. Her voice came out small but steady. She had repeated that sentence so many times it felt like one of the rules taped to Ronald's old fridge. Only this one was meant to help her breathe. Agent Morales stepped out of a side room, suit sharp, expression sharper. They are about to start opening arguments, she said. Ruth murmured. You will not be called today. Expression sharper. Maybe not tomorrow, but I wanted you here for at least some of it. She had repeated that sentence so many times it felt like one of the rules taped to Ronald's old fridge. Aisha said, I need to hear it. Morales searched her face for a second, then nodded. Okay, she said. I need to hear it. Then nodded. Inside. The courtroom was colder. This is where the story stops being just yours and becomes part of the record. The seal on the wall watched everything with carved indifference. Ronald sat at the defense table in a county jail suit instead of a tailored jacket, still trying to arrange his spine like a man in control. Harold Vance sat beside him. Wood gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Aisha took a seat in the second row behind the prosecution. When the judge entered, Ruth claimed the other, organized and dry as ever. Everyone rose. Aisha's knees wobbled just a little. Eagle slid into place on one side of her. When she stood to address the jury, the rustle of the gallery faded to nothing. The federal prosecutor was a woman with iron gray hair and a voice like clean glass. She said, This is a case about a man who built an empire out of wreckage. Not just wrecked cars, wrecked lives. She walked them through it, not all at once, but in sharp strokes. Titles altered, numbers filed, vehicles moved like chess pieces across state lines. Then the other part, a back room with no windows, a safe full of names and faces, a pattern of runaways who did not just vanish on their own. Someone will try to tell you, this is complicated, she said. A safe full of names and faces, a back room with no windows. Across the aisle, Vance's jaw tightened. When his turn came, it is greed with a steering wheel and a lock on the door. You are going to hear painful things. His voice turned warm and regretful. When his turn came, we do not dispute her pain. Vance's jaw tightened. You are going to hear from a young woman who has suffered, almost casually, toward the back of the room, where Eagle's patchless shoulders filled half a row. Ask yourselves, he said, who benefits from portraying my client as a monster? We dispute the story that has been built around it by people who had something to gain from stoking outrage and fear. Donations. Television cameras when that happens. A low sound came from Eagle's chest. Aisha felt it rather than heard it. Ruth's fingers brushed her wrist. Breathe. The first days were a parade of experts and paper, forensic accountants explaining money trails, digital analysts describing how tracking code worked, title clerks testifying about signatures they had not actually watched anyone write. The ledgers came out, page after page projected on screen, neat rows of numbers that added up to something rotten. The first days were a parade of experts and paper. A juror flinched once. Photos appeared with faces blurred when they needed to be. Aisha watched the body cam footage play. Another pressed fingertips against her mouth. Car grills, license plates, grainy images of warehouse floors, the edge of the safe door, her mother's birthday turning under someone else's fingers. She felt strangely removed from it, like watching a movie she had already seen too many times. Outside, every evening, the courthouse steps filled with microphones. Morales gave tight, cautious statements. The prosecutor said nearly nothing. Commentators said far too much. The Iron Riders did not speak to the cameras. They showed up and left through side doors, helmets in their hands, jackets plain. Still, lenses tracked them. By the end of the first week, a new phrase started popping up in headlines and lower thirds. The Iron Riders Protection Project. Someone had leaked the name. A local blog ran with it. By the time Blaze texted Aisha a screenshot of the phrase trending, the Iron Riders Protection Project, someone had leaked the name. Might as well put the eyes to work. On the second Monday, Morales caught Aisha in the hallway again. "Tomorrow," she said. "You are up then." "Early?" Aisha nodded. Her stomach did a slow, queasy roll. That night, sleep came in fragments. Motel carpet, the glow of a phone, the inside of a safe she had never actually seen but now knew too well. She woke before dawn, heart hammering, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen of Ruth's small house. When she stepped into the courtroom the next morning, Ronald glanced back over his shoulder. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He looked smaller, still angry, still trying to wrap himself in outrage like a coat. But there was a tightness at the corners of his mouth that had not been there before. Vance put on his kindest voice for the cross-examination of the girl before her, an officer who had helped process the confiscated vehicles. "With all due respect, Agent," he said, "you are relying on information provided by a group with its own agenda, are you not?" The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained. The jurors watched. "Next witness," the judge said. Her name was called. When Aisha stood, her legs felt as if they were made of something too thin to hold weight. She walked anyway, the short distance to the stand, stretching like a long road. The clerk swore her in. The Bible under her palm felt dusty and cold. "State your name for the record." The prosecutor said, "Aisha Reynolds." She replied. The questions were careful, measured. Where she had lived, who had been in the house, how rules had tightened over time. Enough detail to show control without collapsing her in it. No one made her recite the worst of it in front of strangers. The prosecutor had already entered her earlier statements into the record. The judge had drawn lines around what would be repeated aloud. "What made you send that message?" the prosecutor asked finally. Aisha's fingers tightened on the edge of the witness box. "I heard his truck," she said. "I knew what it meant. I had tried to leave before in smaller ways. Sleepovers, school trips. People believed him when he said I was dramatic. This time, I knew if I went back alone, I was not going to get another chance." She looked toward the jurors. "So I reached out to the only people who had ever said, 'If you need help, call.'" Her eyes flicked briefly to Eagle, then to Ruth, then back. "And they came," she said. "They did not know me. They came anyway." "Thank you," the prosecutor said. "No further questions." Then it was Vance's turn. He approached like a man going to a fragile object, hands open, voice soft. "Aisha," he said, "may I call you that?" She considered, then nodded once. He would anyway. "You have been through a lot," he said. "Losing your mother, adjusting to a new home. No one is denying that was difficult." "Correct. Yes," she said warily. "And grief does color memories, does it not?" he continued. "Make things feel worse than they were, does it not?" He was trying to get her to agree without noticing where he was going. She could feel it. "No," she said. "No." He was trying to get her to agree without noticing where he was going. He blinked. He echoed. "Grief makes some things blurry," she said. but some things get sharper. You remember every time someone helped you, and every time someone hurt you and told you not to talk about it. His jaw tightened. He tried again. The Iron Riders, he said. They took you in, gave you shelter, told you a story about your stepfather that made sense of your pain. Is it possible their view of him influenced what you think you remember? You remember every time someone helped you. Steady. They did not tell me who he was, she said. He did. For 3 years. They just believed me when I finally said it out loud. A couple of jurors shifted. One wrote something down. Vance pressed his lips together. No further questions, he said. When she stepped down from the stand, her legs shook, but her spine felt like it was held up by something more solid than fear. Outside, on the courthouse steps, someone had left a sign leaning against the railing. The letters were hand-painted, uneven, but the message was clear. We believe survivors. The trial stretched for days more, corrupt officials testifying with plea deals hanging over their heads, documents authenticated, timelines pinned to the wall of the jury's understanding. Every time Ronald's defense tried to turn the spotlight on the riders, the focus slid back to the paper trail and the locked rooms. In the end, the closing arguments came down to 2 sentences. From the prosecutor, you saw where the money went. You heard where the girls were found. You know who held the keys. From Vance, you heard where the girls were found. The jury did not take long. Aisha sat between Ruth and Eagle when they filed back in. Her heart thudded against her ribs in slow, heavy beats. On the first count, the 4-person's voice rang out, guilty. On the second, guilty. They kept coming. Trafficking, fraud, conspiracy. Every time the word landed, something in Aisha unwound another fraction of a turn. Ronald exploded once. When the 20th verdict was read, he lurched to his feet, shouting about lies and bikers and ungrateful kids. Bailiffs grabbed his arms. The judge's gavel cracked through the shouting. Sit him down, she said coldly. While he still has legs to sit with, the jurors watched his outburst with eyes that had already made up their minds. If there had ever been a chance for charm to save him, it died right there, in the way he spat and strained against the hands holding him. The jurors watched his outburst with eyes that had already made up their minds. If there had ever been a chance for charm to save him, the judge set a date for sentencing. The charges stacked so high that even Vance's face finally showed something like defeat. Outside, the air felt different. The crowd on the courthouse steps was bigger now. Some held signs about trafficking. Some held signs with the rider's logo sketched beside words like, "Thank you," and "Keep riding." A reporter called out to Eagle, shoving a mic toward him. "Do you have anything to say about the verdict?" she asked. He glanced at Aisha. She shook her head slightly. She did not want her face back on screens with his voice over it. Eagle understood. "We did what anyone should do," he said. "We answered a call." She did not want her face back on screens with his voice over it. Blaze, standing just behind him, added, "If you want to thank somebody, support the shelters and hotlines. They are the ones catching kids when they fall." That night, back at the garage, the riders gathered around the scarred coffee table. Shadow printed out the list of convictions and taped it to the refrigerator, right over an old magnet that said, "You miss 100% of the shots you do not take." "Now what?" Tank asked. Shadow printed out the list of convictions and taped it to the refrigerator, right over an old magnet that said, "You miss 100% of the shots you do not take." Looking at Aisha, "We turn one motel room into more." Aisha nodded. The trial was over. The fight was not. The next phase would not be about taking someone down. It would be about building something up, the kind of thing that might outlast every headline. 6 months later, the garage smelled like fresh paint instead of fear. Morning light slid in through the high windows, catching new banners on the walls. The old charity ride this Sunday posters had been joined by laminated maps, color-coded pins, and a whiteboard with a hand-lettered title across the top, Iron Riders Protection Project. Phase 3. The old charity ride this Sunday posters had been joined by laminated maps, color-coded pins. Some had check marks beside them. Some were circled. Waiting, Aisha stood by the map, a pen in her hand, chewing the cap without realizing it. Aisha stood by the map, Blaze said. Aisha stood by the map, passing behind her with a box full of hotline brochures. We cannot have our program director dying of ink poisoning before senior year, Aisha said. Blaze snorted. You named half these locations and wrote the training script. Own it, kid. On the whiteboard, one phrase was underlined twice. Room 12 model. Safe harbor standard. They had turned the pilot at the old motel into a blueprint. One emergency room per site, Blaze said. Dedicated phone. Hotline numbers on the wall in 3 languages. Staff training on how to spot trouble and who to call. Agreements with local shelters. The first time they'd rolled it out in another town, Aisha had paced the entire night. The first time a girl used one, she hadn't slept for 2 days. Aisha had paced the entire night. 12 doors that opened in instead of closing shut. Ruth stepped out of the office, glasses perched low on her nose, a stack of folders hugged to her chest. Ruth stepped out of the office. She said, "We have 20 minutes before we have to be at the school. Final check-in." Shadow swiveled away from his laptop, where a spreadsheet of incident reports glowed. "All phones are live," he said. "All motel staff have done at least 1 training session, and we have 3 more sites, asking if we can help them set up before the end of the year." "Tank?" Ruth asked. "Locks installed, cameras angled, so they see the door but not inside the room," Tank said. "Contractors got paid. No corners cut. If somebody tries to break in, the door will break them first." Blaze. "Community centers prepped for the panel," Blaze said. "They set up extra chairs when they heard we were bringing bikes. Apparently my face is now inspirational." She made a face. "I would like to return it for a refund." Ruth turned to Aisha. "And you?" she asked. Aisha looked back at the board, at the pins, at the words she had written in her own neat, "I'm okay." At the pins, Aisha looked back at the board, mostly just trying not to throw up on my graduation gown later. Ruth's expression softened. "You get to be nervous about normal things now," she said. "That's allowed." A car horn beeped outside. Sharp and familiar, Eagle pushed open the bay door. Sunglasses on, beard a little more gray than it had been the year before. Cap and gown in the truck. He asked, "Pressed and ready," Ruth said. "Speech printed?" he asked Aisha. She patted her backpack. "Maybe," she said, "if I don't set it on fire before I get there." He grinned. "We'll ride behind the fire truck if we have to." They piled into vehicles. Ruth's truck, a couple of vans, a handful of bikes. The rest of the riders would meet them near the school. The principal had been clear about limiting engine presence on campus. Eagle had agreed to the letter of that request. If not the spirit, as they drove, the town rolled by in familiar pieces. If not the spirit, the church that now hosted quarterly training on trafficking indicators, hosted by Morales and Ruth. The community center with a new sign out front. Partner site, Iron Riders Protection Project. Aisha watched it all through the passenger window, the way some people watched movies they loved and didn't entirely trust. At East Ridge High, the parking lot was already half full. Seniors, in wrinkled blue gowns, milled around, adjusting mortar boards and taking photos. Parents clumped in excited knots. The gym had been turned into a ceremony hall. folding chairs, lined up in perfect rows. Ruth cut the engine in the staff lot. Last chance to bail. She said, "We can drive to the state line instead. You can become a mysterious drifter who reads too much and never finished high school." Aisha thought about it for half a second. "Nah," she said. "I want the paper." As they rounded the corner of the building, a low sound rolled in from the street. Engines, not one, not five, many. Aisha stopped dead on the sidewalk. "You didn't," she said. Eagle's mouth twitched. "We kept it under 200 this time," he said. Carter negotiated a cap. Ruth put a hand up. "We kept it under 200 this time," she said. "One more, and they start charging us parade fees." Out on the road beyond the school fence, motorcycles stretched in a long, gleaming line. They were parked now, engines off, riders standing beside them in their best clothes and worst boots. Some wore full cuts. Some wore plain jackets with small pins. All of them watched the school with a kind of quiet pride that had nothing to do with how loud they could be. Students along the edge of the lot gaped openly. "Is that for her?" One whispered, "Dude." Another said, "That is so metal." Aisha felt her cheeks heat. "I am going to kill you," she muttered at Ruth and Eagle. "Get in line." Ruth said, "Half this crew wants to hug you. The other half wants to adopt you. You'll be busy for a while." They slipped inside before the principal could change her mind. The ceremony blurred at the edges. Speeches, names, applause. A roar from outside every time someone mentioned overcoming obstacles. A little too pointedly, Aisha tuned in and out, the way you do when your body is somewhere your mind has trouble fully inhabiting. Then the counselor was at the podium, clearing her throat. "Every year," she said, "we ask one student to speak who embodies resilience. This year, that student asked to keep things short. I told her I did not believe her, but we will see. Please welcome Aisha Reynolds." The gym erupted. It wasn't just clapping, it was cheering. A low chant started somewhere in the back. "Aisha, Aisha," then broke up into laughter when she covered her face for a second, mortified. She walked to the podium anyway. The paper in her hand trembled. She set it down and put both palms on either side of the mic, grounding herself. "Hi," she said. Her voice echoed off the rafters. The crowd quieted. "I was not supposed to be here." Statistically, the crowd quieted. "I was not supposed to be here." Statistically, girls like me do not make it to their senior year. Not in one piece. She glanced toward the staff section. Girls like me do not make it to their senior year. Statistically, plain clothes and proud. "Some of you know parts of what happened to me," she said. "Some of you only know the headlines. The truth is messy. It always is. Here is the short version." She took a breath. "There was a man who tried to decide what my life would be," she said. "He used fear and rules and silence to try and keep me in place. When I finally ran and asked for help, a lot of people could have ignored it. Some did, but others didn't." She looked at Ruth, at Eagle, at the gym doors, beyond which she knew a river of chrome and leather waited. "A bunch of bikers showed up at a motel one night," she said. "They did not ask if I was worth the trouble. They just decided I was. That changed everything for me." Her fingers drummed once on the podium. "At Eagle, they did not ask if I was worth the trouble. It turns out there are a lot of rooms like mine," she said. "A lot of doors girls are afraid to open. So with some help, we started changing what's behind at least a few of them." She nodded toward the back wall, where a small banner the art club had made hung beside a fire exit. "Safe harbor. If you need help, ask." "We turned one motel room into 12, she said. "We are aiming for 43, maybe more. Safe harbor. If you need help, not because this town is unique, but because every kid who reaches out deserves someone who will pick up. The gym was quiet now. No shuffling, no murmurs. I am not going to give you a big inspirational quote, she said. I do not have one. All I have is this. If you see somebody whose world is on fire, do not just film it. Throw water. Call someone. Stand in the way if you have to. Answer the text. She smiled, small and fierce. And if you are the one whose world is on fire, she added, send the message. Knock on the door. I am standing here because that turned out to be true. Send the message. Knock on the door. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the gym exploded again. When the ceremony was over and caps had been thrown, Aisha pushed through the crowd. Morales shook her hand like she was swearing her in for some future career Aisha hadn't decided on yet. Ruth hugged her so hard. Her ribs creaked. Morales shook her hand like she was swearing her in for some future career Aisha hadn't decided on yet. Teachers clapped her on the back. Call someone. Outside. Ruth hugged her so hard. Her ribs creaked. Diploma in hand. It looked like every chapter within riding distance had shown up. Engines rumbled as riders pulled helmets on. Aisha stood at the edge of the curb. It looked like every chapter within riding distance had shown up. Teachers clapped her on the back. Diploma clutched like a strange new weapon. Eagle walked up, holding something behind his back. In a stunning twist, he said, we got you something. No more jackets. She said automatically, I already have one. Relax, he said. You earned this one the old-fashioned way. He brought his hands forward. It was a helmet, black, clean lines, a small Iron Rider's emblem on one side. Underneath the logo, in neat white letters, was a single word, family, she read. On the back, at the base, 3 tiny characters marked it as hers. AR1. Riders started trying to fight over what number you should be. Eagle said, we went with something simple. A for Aisha, R for riders. 1 for the first kid who texted and got an army. Her chest ached. I cannot ride with you today, she said. Ruth will have a stroke if I show up to the cookout with helmet hair. Aside from the fact you are not cleared for highway runs yet, Ruth said dryly behind her. Nice try. Eagle laughed. Then this is for later, he said. Consider it a standing invitation. He jerked his chin toward the street. For now, he said, we figured maybe you would not mind a little noise on the way home. The formation split. Half the riders took the lead, engines roaring to life. The other half lined up behind. Ruth's truck pulled into the middle of the procession. Aisha in the passenger seat, cap tucked into her lap, gown bunched up around the seatbelt. As they rolled out, people stopped on sidewalks, phones rose. Some waved. Some just stood and watched as nearly 200 motorcycles escorted 1 battered blue pickup truck and 1 teenage girl toward whatever came next. The ride was slow, intentional, not a show of force. A visible promise. We are here, we saw, we will keep showing up. At a red light, Aisha glanced in the side mirror. The road behind them was filled with headlights and chrome, stretching back farther than she could easily count. Her phone buzzed. A text from one of the shelter girls she had met months before. Saw you on TV. Graduated yesterday too. Going to community college in the fall. Thanks for answering. Even though you never knew me. Aisha smiled. She typed back. Proud of you. Keep going. Door is always open. When they reached the edge of town, some of the riders peeled off toward their own cities. Horns honked, hands lifted. By the time Ruth turned down the familiar road toward the garage, the formation had thinned, but the feeling had not. Engines idled down. The day settled. Later, when the cookout smoke drifted into the evening sky and people had drifted home, Aisha stood alone by the map board again. She traced a fingertip from one pinned motel to another, then to a third. It's a good start. Ruth said quietly, coming up beside her. It is not enough, Aisha said. It's not supposed to be, Ruth replied. If the work ever feels finished, we messed up somewhere. Aisha let her hand fall. College in the fall, she said. Classes, work, trips to new motels that smell like old ones. Afraid? Ruth asked. Yeah, Aisha said, a little. She thought about the motel door, the courtroom, the girls at the shelter, the line of bikes outside the school, the safe harbor rooms she had helped plan that now stood quiet and ready. In towns she had never set foot in, she thought about how small she had felt once, how enormous the world had seemed, how both things were still true, just in different ways. Ruth bumped her shoulder. You know, Ruth said, not every call is going to be yours to answer. That is the point. We are building something that does not need one girl's trauma as fuel. Aisha nodded. I know, she said. I just also know what it feels like to dial and hope. The sky over the garage was streaked with orange and pink. Somewhere in the distance, a single engine revved and faded. In the quiet that followed, the sky over the garage was streaked with orange and pink, just cardboard and ink. The map board loomed large and small at the same time, and behind each pin, a door. Aisha took a breath that went all the way down. Okay, she said. Next room, next town, next kid. Ruth smiled. That's the thing about engines, she said. You keep them maintained. They will carry you farther than you ever thought you could go. Later, when Aisha finally fell asleep in her own bed, diploma on the dresser, and the new helmet on the chair, the last thought she had before the dark rolled in was simple. Somewhere out there, a door would open tonight, and when it did, someone would answer. The heart of this story carries a simple but powerful truth. Silence protects the wrong people. When we hide our pain out of fear, shame, or the belief that no one will care, we don't just trap ourselves. We give power to those who misuse their. Aisha's journey reminds us that reaching out is not weakness. It is courage, and courage has a way of calling other courage forward. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a friend, a stranger, or an entire community willing to stand in the rain for someone they barely know. It takes a village may be an old saying, but it still rings true. No one heals alone, and no one should have to. This story also highlights a quiet lesson many adults understand too well. Not all families are built from blood. Some are built from choice, respect, and shared humanity. And in a world that often feels divided, the act of showing up, truly showing up, for another person is still one of the purest forms of justice we have. As Americans often say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. The tough here aren't the loudest or the strongest. They're the ones who refuse to look away. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever seen someone break free from silence? Or found unexpected support when you needed it most? Share your reflections below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs today, or found unexpected support when you needed it most. Please like the video to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more gripping, meaningful stories ahead. Wishing you peace after whatever storms you've weathered, and the steady kind of hope that grows stronger each day.